Hey folks, in today's story we're going to hear about a woman who, the very second she signed her divorce papers, immediately canceled the 15 supplementary credit cards that were in her ex-husband's name. At that exact moment, he was busy booking a lavish engagement party costing $75,000 for his mistress. But a single sentence from the event planner froze him right in his tracks. Friends, in life there are crossroads we never wish to face, and divorce is perhaps one of the most painful. After 20 long years dedicated body and soul to her family, the only thing the protagonist of our story had left in her hands was a thin sheet of paper weighed down by countless bitter memories, the divorce decree. However, what makes this story exceptional isn't the tears or the desperate pleas. The story begins right at the instant her ex-husband hurriedly hops into a car with his mistress, turning his back on the woman with whom he had shared half his life. In that moment, there was no breakdown, only a terrifying silence. The silence of an iceberg, of contained patience, finally beginning to crack. Instead of sinking into sadness, this woman chose a different path. She transformed her pain into strength, her years of patience into a meticulously calculated plan to claim the justice she was owed. From canceling the cards she had provided for her husband's entire family to the direct confrontation with those who had taken her selflessness for granted, every one of her steps was a firm shout demonstrating her own worth. The story we are about to hear isn't simply a chronicle of recovering material assets, but the journey of a woman who, having finally decided to live for herself, encounters her true self. It is a narrative full of dramatic and unexpected twists that emerges from the darkness of betrayal into the light of freedom, leaving us with deep lessons about the human heart. I clutched the folder containing our marriage certificate tightly. Only a few minutes had passed since I'd walked out of the county courthouse, and the papers still seemed to hold a faint warmth. Standing on the building steps, a gust of cold wind forced me to pull my coat tighter. I had rushed out that morning wearing a thin jacket, so my body was shivering, but my heart was burning hotter than ever. I felt as if a boulder that had crushed me for years had finally been lifted. My ex-husband walked faster than me. As soon as the formalities were over, he turned abruptly and hopped into a car parked at the curb. He didn't even roll down the window. Through the tinted glass, I managed to catch a glimpse of a young woman in a pink coat sitting in the passenger seat. I didn't have to think hard to know it was his mistress. I didn't feel rage. On the contrary, I felt liberated. 20 years of marriage, from the first day full of hope to its collapse, had come to an end today. I pulled out my cell phone and lit up the screen. My fingers, without the slightest hesitation, opened the banking app. Some time ago, my ex-husband, Jelani, had told me he needed liquidity for his business and asked me to apply for a main credit card in my name and several supplementary cards for him and his family. Back then, without thinking twice, I gave him 15 of them at once. One for him, one for my sister-in-law, and even several for his drinking buddies. Thinking about it now, I was a genuine fool. I allowed them to play with my credit score like it was a toy while they spent without control. I entered the supplementary card management menu. The last digits of the 15 cards appeared clearly, and next to them, the word active. I stared fixedly at the card he used most frequently, the one ending in 886. He always said those numbers brought him luck, but I knew that just last month he had used precisely that card to buy his mistress a handbag worth over $3,500. I bit my lip and pressed the cancel button. The system asked for confirmation. Without hesitating for a second, I accepted. Immediately, a message appeared. The supplementary card ending in 8886 has been successfully canceled. This card can no longer be used. Reading that message, I felt like a heavy burden vanished from my heart. I continued canceling the 15 cards one by one, not leaving a single one active. With each cancellation came a notification, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Ping, ping, ping. That sound was sweeter than any melody. Just as I canceled the last card, I received a voice note on WhatsApp from my best friend Zuri. Her voice sounded euphoric. "McKenna, I've got huge news for you. One of the regulars at my boutique is the event director at a luxury hotel, and she just called to tell me she saw your ex-husband. He was booking an engagement party with a young girl. He wouldn't stop saying he wanted a $75,000 party, that it had to be something grand for the 18th of next month. I held the phone and couldn't help but smile. What perfect timing, I thought, while on the other side of town, he was dreaming of a wonderful future with his mistress. From right here, I was cutting off the tap. I replied to Zuri's audio. I know, thank you, Zuri. You'll see. Today he won't even be able to pay the deposit for the reservation. I sent the message, put the phone in my pocket, tucked the folder into my bag, and headed home. My steps were light as a feather. Before, every time I passed near the courthouse, I used to think, what will I do if the day comes when we can no longer live together? Now that the day had arrived, I felt strangely at peace. On the way home, I came across a street vendor selling honey-roasted nuts. I stopped for a moment and bought a bag. The warmth of the nuts in my hands comforted me to my core. From now on, I will live for me, I promised myself. Not even 30 minutes had passed since I got home when I heard violent banging on the door, as if they were going to break it down. Immediately, I heard the shrill voice of my ex-sister-in-law. "McKenna, open the door right now. Do you think you can hide in there?" I was about to throw an orange peel into the trash when I heard her voice, and I frowned. It was obvious that my ex-husband, Jelani, had realized his cards weren't working and had told his sister. I dried my hands and walked over to the door, but I didn't open it immediately. "Who is it?" I asked through the door. "If you have something to say it from there. Why are you pounding on the door like that?" "Who do you think it is?" The voice of Bisa, my ex-sister-in-law, sounded increasingly impatient. "Open the door already. My brother is making a fool of himself at the hotel. If you don't fix this right now, you're going to regret it." I sighed and opened the door. Bisa was planted on the threshold. She was wearing a flashy dress with a floral print, her hair teased up high like a lion's mane, a thick layer of makeup, and lips painted an intense red. In her hand, she clutched a shiny handbag that I recognized instantly as one bought with my supplementary card. Before I could invite her in, she barged inside and tossed the bag onto the sofa. The metal chain hit the coffee table with a shrill noise, and my scared old cat hid under the sofa. Bisa stood with her hands on her hips, puffing out her chest and looking at me with fury. "Have you lost your mind? My brother just called me. He tried to pay the deposit for the engagement party, and none of the cards worked. He called the bank, and they told him the primary cardholder had canceled all the supplementary ones. Who else could it be but you?" I crossed my arms and faced her. "Yes, I canceled them. So what?" "So what?" Bisa screamed, as if she had heard the most unbelievable thing in the world. "My brother has been using those cards for years, and me too. Just last week I saw some shoes I was planning to buy this week, and now you cancel them just like that? Who do you take my brother and me for?" I smiled with disdain. I went to my study and took a folder of documents out of a drawer. They were the original contracts from when the supplementary cards were issued. I had always kept them as proof, just in case. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table and pointed at the text. "Read it yourself. Right here it says clearly that the primary card holder is me, McKenna Jones. The right to use the supplementary cards depends on the card holder. In other words, if I want to cancel them, I cancel them. And who I give them to is my decision. It has nothing to do with you or your brother." Bisa bent down and glanced at the contracts. Her look became increasingly confused, but she kept insisting. "These are old papers. My brother told me he changed the ownership to his name a long time ago. This contract is fake." I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and shoved the screen right in front of her face. "Look closely. The primary cardholder is still me. When do you say the ownership changed? Let him bring a bank statement that proves it. If he manages that, not only will I reactivate the cards, but I will also apologize. If not, stop making a scene here." Bisa was left speechless. Her face went from red to white. A moment later, she softened her tone a bit, although her resentment was still obvious. "Okay, let's suppose the cards are yours. But my brother has lived with you for 20 years. How can you be so cruel? He's about to start a new life, and you leave him unable to pay even the deposit for his engagement party. Don't you think about the embarrassment he'll face in front of everyone?" Thinking about my 20 years of humiliation, rage invaded me. And did he think about embarrassment when he went to book a $75,000 party with his mistress? Did he think about being cruel to me when he was siphoning off our joint assets to spend them freely on her? I've lived 20 years with him, saving every last penny. I've barely bought myself a piece of clothing over $50. He sure had a great time buying handbags for his mistress without blinking. Now that he's out of money, he remembers me? Too late. Bisa took a step back at my words. With reddened eyes, she suddenly reached for a glass on the small table. It looked like she was going to smash it. I quickly stopped her and pointed to the door. "Don't you even think about it. I'll call the police right now. Let them come and decide if my crime is canceling my own cards or if the crime is yours, coming to my house to threaten me. And then I'll make sure all the neighbors in this subdivision come out to see the show of how your family harasses people." Bisa's hand stopped in midair. She looked at me, then looked toward the door, and finally kicked the floor. She grabbed her bag from the sofa and said through gritted teeth, "You'll see. I'm telling my mother. When she finds out about this, she won't leave you in peace." With that, she turned around and left. The slam was so loud the walls shook and a painting wobbled. Looking at the dented doorknob, I squeezed the glass I had in my hand tightly. The water had gone cold, but my heart was firmer than ever. If Bisa had left, it was certain that my mother-in-law would come. The problems looming ahead wouldn't be few, but I was no longer afraid. From the moment I canceled those 15 credit cards, I decided I wouldn't endure any more humiliations. I went to the sofa, picked up the folder of contracts Bisa had thrown, and put it back in the drawer. I put a little more food out for my old cat. He came out from under the sofa and rubbed against my legs. I crouched down, stroked his head, and thought, no matter how difficult the days ahead are, I have to live well, for myself. Not even 30 minutes had passed since Bisa left when there was a knock at the door again. This time it wasn't violent banging, but a very rhythmic knock, knock, knock. Each knock seemed to weigh a ton, as if trying to crush my heart. I was petting the cat, who had curled up in my lap. As soon as I heard the knocking, I knew it was my mother-in-law. I left the cat on the sofa, got up, and went toward the door. Before opening, I heard her voice from outside. "Makena, child, open the door. It's me. Bisa told me she came earlier and made a scene. I've come so we can talk things over calmly." She spoke softly, but her usual authoritarian tone hadn't changed. I undid the deadbolt. As soon as the door cracked open, my mother-in-law pushed it and entered. She was still wearing the dark green wool coat I had gifted her 2 years ago and a gray head wrap. In her hand, she held a cloth bag that seemed to contain something heavy. She walked into the house without taking off her shoes, leaving muddy tracks on the floor I had just mopped. I looked at the dirty footprints and felt a pang of annoyance, but I said nothing. After all, she was an elderly person. I decided to listen to what she had to say. My mother-in-law didn't look at me. She went straight to the center of the living room and set the cloth bag on the coffee table. With a dull thud, several apples rolled onto the floor. She dropped onto the sofa, purposefully occupying the spot where I usually sat, and patted the armrest. "Makena, come, sit here. I want to tell you a couple of things seriously." I dragged over a chair and sat facing her. I placed my hands on my knees and waited for her to speak. My mother-in-law let out a long, deep sigh, as if carrying all the injustices of the world. "Bisa called me crying a while ago. She told me you canceled all the supplementary cards. Jelani couldn't pay the deposit at the hotel and had to beg people just to get a ride home. Tell me, how could you act in such an inconsiderate way?" I didn't answer. I waited for her to continue. Seeing my silence, she went on. "Jelani made a mistake. Yes, cheating on you with that girl is his fault. But all men, when they're young, can do something foolish. Besides, you've lived together for 20 years. There's some affection left, isn't there? How could you cut him off like that? He's used those cards for years. If you cancel them all of a sudden, what kind of image is a businessman like him going to project? Hearing this, I couldn't help but